Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Bubble, and I hope you're all having a sane week during lockdown. I hope you're all managing to find some positives and finding what works for you best to get through this, because I know that we're all different. This week's guest is a breath of fresh air. Sophie Garner is a singer, songwriter, vocal coach. She has been involved in The Voice Kids. She was the first person to ever sing at the O2 Arena, which is pretty impressive to go on your CV. But her passion for singing and her love for helping others find their voice through singing as well is really something quite special. So I'm really looking forward to Sophie. So if you're one of those people that really love singing in the shower but has never had the courage to maybe join a choir, this one's definitely for you. Finally we got here. I have to tell everybody it's taken us about 2 or 3 weeks. I've been backwards and forwards trying to sort things out, but I was so glad we finally got here.
I know. I was thinking, is it ever going to happen? And you were having house stuff, weren't you? And of course, being on this environment, we are really at the mercy of outside influences. Yeah. You know, cars outside, lawnmowers.
Yeah. I know. I had a week where the house next door decided to have the biggest kind of pneumatic drill going, and it just it just goes through your head completely.
Did they not tell you? Did they forewarn you?
No, not at all. No.
How dare they?
I know. They're done now anyway. So I described in my introduction that you are a force to be reckoned with in the music industry, and the impact that you've had through your singing has been really something quite special. And I've recently come across you through a mutual friend, and I'm fascinated by the work that you've done around your singing. But if we start right back at the beginning, and I'm sure lots of people are going to be able to resonate this, when you were at school and you had this passion for music and singing, it wasn't necessarily encouraged from a young age, was it?
No. I think, back in the day, and I remember this so instinctively. In middle school, you'd come in, and they still do this now. So you line up, and normally the younger children come in first, so the teacher goes, "Now sit down," and then the upper years would be at the back. So we'd come in, and it would be like, "Oh God, school assembly," and everything was very religious. And I'll never forget. So one of the songs was. All over the world, everywhere, where we're living, and when I needed a shelter, were you there?
Yeah, I remember that one.
And the creed, and he's got the whole world, and it was so boring, and you couldn't be expressive. It all had to be sung in a very, very reserved way, and that was it. That was music. And then you'd have the real like fuddy-duddy bearded, bright nylon shirted, brown tied, like sort of slightly hippie but very academic, like the ones you'd get on the science programs in the 70s. And yes. Music was taught, this is the crotchet, and it was all just so boring. And ironically, I actually didn't do music at middle school because or upper school actually, because it was so uninspiring. So I did drama. Right. So drama was where and I needed it, I think, because that allowed me to express myself physically and vocally. Yeah. Whereas music was it wasn't about the physicality. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. I was able to get aggression and emotions, which of course when you're a teenager, it's the most horrendous time. You're discovering you're kind of going, oh, Mum, I don't need you. Oh, Mum, I do need you. Yeah. Oh, I want a boyfriend. Do they love me? Don't they love me? Who's my best friend? Oh, you were my best friend last week. Now you're not. It's full of insecurities. So drama was an absolute lifeline for me. And at that time, I started creating, and I've still got it now. I've got this red book, which was my book of emotions. Red probably a quite poignant colour because it's angry, so I just literally divulged everything to this book, and my truth and angst and anxiety and emotions, and I've still got the book, and that contained everything that I couldn't express verbally to friends or to parents. And so writing songwriting, poetry writing was a really powerful thing, and still is. You know, I've come full circle as a professional singer and songwriter. I'm still able to execute those emotions. And, you know, let's be honest, a good songwriter, that's what they do. They tell a story that the listener has to try and unravel, hopefully beyond, I love you and you love me. Oh, happy, happy we will, you know.
A Disney Channel.
Yes.
So at what point did you just know, did you have this something in you that you just knew that that's what you were destined to do?
Totally, like innately. I'll never forget. So my first dramatic role was at the age of, I think I was either 5 or 6, and I played Snow White, but it was Snow White and the 25 Dwarfs, because the teacher had to make sure every child in the class, so, you know, we ended up with every emotion, you know, skinny, bony, shorty, brownie eyes. I mean, literally, talk about milking it. And I got the role, and I ended up, obviously times must have been hard because they didn't give me a proper dress like she wore, so I had to wear the bridesmaid dress from my auntie's wedding that still fit me from a year before, which was blue, light blue with white flowers. I mean, completely un-Snow White. And there's this scene, and I look over the wishing well, and I can't remember how it went, but that was my big song, and it was like, I just loved it. It was just so special. And then I ended up getting the lead roles in King Edward's School in Bury St Edmunds. I'd get the lead role for everything, and it was the only thing I was good at. I was rubbish at everything else. Knew I was probably one step away from being put in what would now be the, you know, 1-to-1 tuition, being a statemented kid. I was just on the verge, and I think it was my creativity that saved me and kept me in the regular class. But I was flying by the seat of my pants. I used to copy my friends, you know, stuff next door. I'd be like, what are the answers? You know, and the teachers all knew that. They all knew that I was messed up and struggling. So I just literally filled everything into acting and singing, and thank goodness for that, and for an understanding drama teacher that allowed me to just release that. So I knew I was going to be a singer and actress.
I love that.
I knew it.
I love that, because I did drama A level, and I absolutely loved it, and that's where I lacked confidence. I was very shy, but the drama class was my space to almost pretend I was somebody different, or perhaps actually not somebody different, probably the person that I really was inside. Share. But then life got in the way, and I didn't pursue it. So I love the fact that you knew, and you were dead set on what you wanted to do, and you didn't let anything else get in the way and stop you. And look what you've gone on to achieve. Yeah.
And I did actually go back to school. I went back to Kegs, as it's fondly known, not King Edward VI, Kegs. I went back there 15 years ago, and I went up to the reception, and I said, and it was really different because, of course, back in the day, you just walk into a school. Now there was all buzzers, and, you know, it was like, wow, Kegs is all secure and proper. So they let me in, and the receptionist said, can I help you? I said, yeah. I said, I was in the class of 89 here, and I said, and I wondered if any of the following teachers are still here. So I listed off all my teachers, because I haven't forgotten their names. I said, oh, Mrs. Tyler. She went, well, she's now the head. And she was like my head of years. She's now the head. Mr. Sutton, my French teacher. Yeah, he's here. And then I've now forgotten the other one's name, because obviously perimenopause.
Yeah. See? Tell me about it. I know.
I can't remember his name. I can see him. I just said that. I remember all their names, so I've forgotten his name. But anyway, she said, he's here and he's retiring today.
Oh.
I know, and she went, she went, do you want to see them? I went, I would love to. She went, I'm now going to buzz them, and she said, who shall I say is here? I went, don't. I said, just say the punk of 1989 is here. So she put me on speaker, so I could hear, and Mrs. Tyler went, Sophie Garner, and she came down, and we both just cried.
Isn't that lovely?
It was so emotional, and it was all filmed, and we just hugged, and making me emotional now. And I said to her, I went, I'm so sorry for being a nightmare, Mrs. Tyler. She went, call me Jane. I went, I can't, you're my teacher. She went, Sophie, we all knew what was going on, and we just tried to do the best. I said, but I was a nightmare. I caused so much trouble. She went, it's okay. And that was real healing for me. And she took me around the school. And the most emotional thing was I went and sat in my seat in my classroom, and I just bawled my eyes out because it was all real again.
Yeah.
You know, just incredible. So that put a lot of ghost to rest.
And do you think that's why you now have such an affinity with teaching younger people in schools about singing and about the
absolutely,
yeah,
completely, because I'm an empath in the truest sense that and much to my detriment really, I feel it. I can walk into a room and I can feel it, and I have to really kind of do some visualization and put myself in a bubble to protect, because I can literally feel what a child's feeling, and I didn't understand it for a long time, but I see in children what I had, and I know I can help fix. And so, and this sounds like a paradox, I suppose, but in healing them, it helps heal my inner child. You know, it's a beautiful exchange to watch a child that is in a school where they're literally cast aside. There's no hope for them. Everyone's given up on them, but nobody's thought to find out what they might be able to not necessarily be good at, but what they will enjoy, that they can express through like a conduit. And often it is music. And for me, I don't care if someone's good or bad at singing, it's the participation in it. And you know, gone are the days now, thankfully, where the choir leader says you can't sing, which is such a loaded, damaging sentence. I teach so many adults, Rachel, that have been told that, and they're standing in my room 30 years later still feeling that. So powerful, because I suppose vocally, regardless of whether you want to sing for a living or not, this is how we vocalize our emotions and who we are. So when you sing, to some extent, it's like you're undressing and going, this is just me, I'm going to now give you me. So it's the equivalent of someone saying, your tits are really gross. You know, someone saying you can't sing is so damaging.
And you're right, and I do remember that. I remember kids at school.
Did you have a choir leader like that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I always loved singing. In fact, I did start singing. I had singing lessons last year because I'd not sung before. But I did start again because I loved it, because it does make you feel good. And I just wanted to know whether I could still do it, because you just don't know. But I do remember kids at school being picked out and saying, well, no, you can't be in the choir. And I think, well, now looking back, that's such a bad thing to say to somebody. It's like you say,
So have you carried on with the singing lessons?
No, I haven't. I did laps. So I learned a couple of songs and then I did laps, just because my idea was that I've got it in my head that I want to sing in public at some point in the next few years.
Fabulous.
It's kind of a challenge in my head. And I think
what were the two songs?
I learned the Marty Webb, take that look off your face. I can't think what the actual song's called. Okay. So I really like that one. And then my memory's gone now. Dusty Springfield one, but I can't remember the name of the song.
Sort of a Preacher Man, or
no?
I Think I'm Going Back.
No, not that one. It'll come to me later. But I'm the same as you. My short-term memory's terrible.
It's horrendous, isn't it?
Yeah. So I can see the benefits of, and we all talk about how everybody like loves singing in the shower, no matter what our abilities are. It makes you feel better. It
Absolutely.
makes you feel good, doesn't it?
Yeah, completely. Endorphins,
Yeah.
serotonin.
At what point in your career, because obviously you've done some pretty amazing things, which we'll get to. At what point did you have that moment where you thought, yeah, this is I've made it. This is what I really wanted to achieve?
It's a really interesting question. When did I think? Okay, so making, I suppose, is a bit of a dichotomy. It's almost like I think, and what is making it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what is success? I think I knew I'd arrived in myself, and I knew this is it now. I can actually make a living out of this. Was when I was working at the Body Shop as a sales assistant, doing people's makeup, and my mum was a cleaner for a man that basically ran all the live music at Pizza Express restaurants all around the country, and she said, "Oh, my daughter sings," and he was like, "Yeah, heard that before." She gave him a tape, and he was, in her words, blown away. Couldn't believe that this voice was coming out of someone that was 19. So he asked me round, and we did a little play around, experiment with music, and that was it. He said, I would like to kind of take you under my wing and manage you, get you out of that shop, get you singing. And the next 6 months were just like this whirlwind. I was going to work at the Body Shop 5 days a week, getting home, and then 4 nights a week going straight out to do a 3-hour gig.
Wow.
I learned 200 songs in 3 months
God.
by heart, and I was literally, it was just work, home, gig, work, home, gig. And it was hilarious because what I used to do, I was so shattered in the day. I was really close friends with my manager in the shop. So she'd go, "Right, Sophie, go upstairs and stock take," and I'd have a little kip.
Brilliant.
And she'd shout up when she, needed me. I mean, it was tiring. I really, I worked that apprenticeship, and then I left the shop, and I've never looked back. So I'm 47 now. That was what, 27 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
And I've never looked back. So that was just incredible. And then I was doing jazz gigs. I had sellout nights at Dean Street Pizza Express. I've toured the world. I've had management in the Middle East. I've sung for the French president. I've done it all, from the sticky floor pubs to singing in front of, the richest people in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. It's just, and it's a humbler because you do something like that, and then you come back to the sticky floor and you go, and you get that leveler of where you sit within all of that, and being in the studio and writing songs and singing on the main stage at the O2 Arena, beating Bon Jovi by a week.
So how did that come about? Because weren't you the first person to sing on the O2?
I was.
So
which
cool.
Really, it's got me a lot of work, as you can imagine, because it's like a CV.
Yeah.
It was a massive gig for Lloyd's TSB, and it was a big corporate gig. They'd hired the entire arena, and it was due to open, I think, 12 days later, to the, to public gigs. So that was John Bon Jovi. So they had, I think, 4,000 members of staff. So the head of Lloyd's TSB was there. There were people from the States in banking and business. And there was me, the Sugar Babes, and McFly. So I went on first. And I didn't realise at the time, I obviously hadn't been reading the news, but the sound engineer went, you do know that you're the first artist that's going to be gracing this stage. It was like,
Wow.
wow. And there was still plastic on some of the seats. Some of the backstage toilets in the dressing rooms didn't work. And apparently in one of the dressing rooms that me and my keyboard player in, Elton John was going to be using it at some point that year. It was just, it was great. But it was just a gig. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. Do you say it's just a gig, but so do you not suffer with nerves about situations like that?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. It's really interesting. That was because it was a corporate gig and not a gig doing my own stuff. I see it in a different mindset. For instance, I used to suffer horrendously with acid reflux, so much so that it resulted in having a vocal op in 2011 and nearly waving goodbye to my career with a huge amount of loss, which we could talk about in a minute if you want to.
Yeah.
It's incredible what that process was. And I had to learn to sing again, which was horrendous. But when I used to go on stage, I used to throw up. And sometimes it would be just before going on stage, sometimes on stage, and I'd have to turn around and pretend to dance, and I'd be facing the drummer and he'd be going, I mean, horrendous. God. So hydrochloric acid coming up into my throat and then having to carry on. God. So that's nerves, and that would be when I would be performing my own stuff. So I was, headlining at events.
Yeah.
That's when I would get nervous, but not because not nerves of am I capable of doing this or am I good enough? Just, I suppose, the excitement and the tension of going out there and wanting to give a great performance.
Yeah. I suppose it's the pressure you put on yourself, isn't it? To show up the best you can be.
Yeah. Actors are the same, aren't they?
Yeah.
And you almost get off. There's a sort of, it's a two-way thing, isn't it? Because you want to be on stage, but you're scared, but you also love that fear. And it's turning that fear into excitement.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and we could all learn with that, because I think fear stops so many people from doing things. But if they could try and shift their mindset into thinking it's not fear, it's something to embrace and it's excitement, then we'd
absolutely
overcome a lot more. So let's look at the situation where you did nearly lose your voice then, because that must have been horrific, because that's your life. It was
the worst point, I would say. Next to having a marriage breakup, that was equal. So I started noticing problems with my voice in the recording studio. So at this time, I was recording my solo album. So the solo album is the big album. It's what an artist does when, they want to release their own material to the world. And for me, Paul and I, my partner, we'd invested £50,000 of our own money into this project.
Yeah.
So we had a massive plan. We'd been in the studio for 2 years. My producer was the producer for Charlie XCX when she first started out. And basically in the studio, it was, what's going on, Sophie, with your voice when you're singing high, something. And I noticed stuff was happening and I wasn't able to control it, which put the fear of life up me. It'd be like, I don't know, David Beckham going, why is my left foot doing that when I go to kick the ball?
Yeah.
Horrendous. This instrument that I know inside out was suddenly not doing what I wanted it to do. So I went and had a strobe put down my throat, and I had really inflamed vocal cords, and basically there was fibrous tissue on my left vocal cord that needed to be removed. That was a whole horrendous back and forth. I ended up having, I think, 7 tubes, and they couldn't get a good look because I had a hyper gag reflex, so they had to put me out, which they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And then when I came round, the surgeon was over me and he went, "Sophie, we are going to have to operate." I was still off my face on, coming round. So then we had to put that time aside. Now, unfortunately, because that was right in the middle of the album, everything was affected. We'd put aside, I think, something like 15 grand for PR. Yeah. And I'm sure you know this. PR is expensive. You're looking at on average 1.5K a month. So we'd put that aside for a really good lead-in to the album with a leading PR agency that were looking after A-listers. Yeah. And so I had the op. I then had to have 3 months recovery. And that was a really interesting process. So after the op, I had a week of total silence. And when I say total silence, I mean, Buddhist retreat type silence. I couldn't say a single word because the vocal cord surface had to heal. So I'd got a whiteboard and was writing gin, bugger off, chocolate. It broke in the end because I got so frustrated. I just was like, with the so and Paul, my partner, filmed the whole process. My PR company said, "Film it," because I didn't want to tell them, and they were like, "Sophie, this is PR gold dust. You've got to film it." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness!" So we did. And I got loads of followers from people going, "Oh my God, I'm in the industry, and if anyone knew about my vocal problems, there'd be this stigma, failed goods, damaged goods." So I had the week of silence, and then Paul actually filmed me talking for the first time, and I just cried. Then I had 3 months of rehab with a speech and language therapist, which meant literally going back to basics, nursery rhymes, days of the week. I mean, really basic stuff. And what was coming out was just awful. So I then went to sing my first gig 3 months later, and I couldn't finish the gig. I had to say to the bride and groom, "Sorry, but I can't finish what you've booked me for," because my voice just gave up. So I felt disabled. And unfortunately, all the money we'd put aside for PR, we ended up living off. So when we came back to release the album,
it's gone.
It was over. So, and I was going to be listed for B-list for radio. I'd been on the radio. It was all going to go, and I watched it all go.
So how did you pick yourself up after that?
I went to a really dark place. I went to a very, very dark place. It was awful. I became very angry, disillusioned, bitter, and it took years to get through it because I knew that I was never going to get that opportunity again. And the fact that we'd spent all of that money that we weren't going to recoup, and 2 years in the studio, it was like a grief. It was a bereavement. And it almost came between me and my partner because all that money, and I was going through my own issues, with mental health as a result of all that happening. So it was a difficult time to just live, really. I lost my identity because my voice is me. It's not like a guitarist that plays, my instrument is in me, and all of a sudden this instrument can't perform. I was sounding like a squeaky kid. So it took ages, but I'm now well and truly out the other side. But that was really difficult.
But you could have easily just packed it all in at that point, though, couldn't you? You could have easily said, okay, I accept this, and I'm going to have to do something different. So what was the thing that really got your mind thinking, okay, I can't give up on this?
My love of singing, the fact that is how I release, and that eventually my voice would get better because the surgeon said, you will eventually be back to a new normal.
Yeah.
And I eventually picked up again, started gigging, but obviously, as I said, all that money that was put aside for the album, that, and you know, if you've got PR behind you, you could sell a chocolate teapot to a man in the desert. And we couldn't do it on our own, so we let that go. Then I started teaching. I got this offer for teaching in a primary school, and that opened up this whole other area, which then dovetailed with my singing career. And I've just embraced it, and I've been teaching for the last 15 years, you know, kids, people with dementia, people with brain injury, stroke, children that have self-harmed, you name it. I've done it, and it's lovely.
Yeah, and it's almost like it's not meant to be, because obviously you didn't want to go through that experience, but it almost brings you full circle to taking all those experiences you had as a child in that environment to do what you're doing now, which is almost like your calling.
Absolutely, yeah, it feels like that. It feels like that. And, you know, and even in this lockdown, which has been horrendous, having to teach on Zoom, I've managed to write a book, and, you know, all my energy has gone into that. And I don't think I'd have been able to write that had we not been in lockdown.
Yeah, I've talked to loads of people that have said they've had that moment where they've stopped to get out what they needed to get out, but they wouldn't have had the time to do otherwise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And obviously, you know, we can't not talk about the fact that you're involved in The Voice, and again, working with children. So how does that feel to be in that position where you can coach children on such a programme as that, and then see them on the big screen overcoming their
with
hurdles?
The Voice, I know, with The Voice, and I felt very privileged. I know the two head coaches for The Voice very well. They're very dear friends, and one of them said to me, Sophie would love you to work with the kids because you're just going to make them feel really at ease. So I was brought in as one of the coaches at the first furlough. Is that the right word? Furlong, is it?
Yeah. Furlong,
I'm getting my furlough and my furlong. Yeah. It's too much lockdown at the first furlong. So they literally, I'm that first rung, so they come for their audition, and I'm one of the coaches that is there and has the decision on whether they go through to the next stage. So I'm sat with a producer, and we're there to make them feel comfortable. And it's a great program. They have the children's wellness at their heart. They really are looked after and nurtured. It's a great process. You know, they feel like they've come out for the day and done something, even if they don't get through. So I only did 2 seasons, but it was lovely to be part of what is actually a massive team of people and very carefully structured. I felt really proud. And they're very particular about the coaches that they have, and quite rightly so, because, you know, we're having to nurture children that, as we know, if they're given bad support, if they're not given any support, then they are basically going to walk out of that audition and go, my life has been ruined, you know, and they need to be in safe hands. So that was really good fun. Really, really good fun.
It seems to me that as adults, we almost need to inject some more of that spirit from childhood of being towards singing. It's for everybody, whether they think they're a great singer or not, because it is that release. So how do we encourage older people to get back into singing? Have you seen a rise in choirs, for instance, online popping up during lockdown?
Yes. So it was interesting going back for the short period we've had of returning to whatever normality is. I set up a new choir. I was flooded, Rachel. I can't believe it. And what was really interesting is that the dominating factor of wanting to join a choir wasn't completely singing. It was, I need to get out and meet people. This lockdown has really affected me. I want to just be among people, make new friends. So I think when we come out of this again, I think people, because there's so much separation and an inability, you know, we can't hug people, and hugging is how we communicate, and seeing a face without a mask, you know, we need to be able to read a whole face. So everything is being sabotaged in the way we communicate. So I think people need to be encouraged by saying, come and sing just to release. Come and sing just to let go. I think the language needs to change. And when we had the first lockdown, I lost a lot of my choir members that weren't happy to come online, and that was a very difficult period, and I took it personally, you know, that they weren't in it as part of the gang. And the people that stayed, we've all become so close. We've, you know, they've had people die, and we've all supported each other. So coming on Zoom has been a lifeline. Even though they've not been able to have harmonies, they've showed up for each other. They've got a commitment to each other and to me, which is lovely. So I think now, for me, it made me really reframe what I want as my tribe. So when I advertise now, I've changed my language, and it's about friendship, camaraderie. It's about singing and laughter. And they're all listed in equal measure. And as a result, lo and behold, all those people are coming. I've got a lady with chemo, and on session 2, I think it was, she went, I'm going to have to go now because I've got chemo at 8 in the morning. It's like, wow, you know, and they've found another tumour, I think, and she's like, this group's really important to me. What an investment, you know, so special. So I think people, and a lot of people won't join a choir because they go, oh, I don't think I can sing well. That's why you're coming to join a choir, so I can teach you to sing well.
I get that though. I think it's quite intimidating. I think, I mean, I class myself as being fairly confident, but even I would love to be part of some kind of community singing thing. But I always kind of think, oh, well, they've been doing it for years. They all know what they're doing. They've all, you know, kept up their singing. So it puts you off. So I think it is about changing the language, isn't it, around it?
It is, and it's also about, I mean, I don't put up with any bitchiness or divas or clickiness. And I think a choir is a representation of you as a choir leader. It's your responsibility to set that energy up in the room. And because that's me, and that's what I would want, and I think that's what a choir needs to ask themselves. If I joined a choir, what would I want? How would I want to feel? So I've produced an atmosphere that I would want. So I have a couple of like my, what I call my assistant friends. So they'll take the new person under their wing and, you know, look after them while I'm dealing with everything else. And they all go, oh, wow, I feel so relaxed. Everyone's so nice, because I wouldn't put up with anyone that would, you know, badmouth. They'd be out because it's back to that school mentality again of you can't sing.
I suppose it is that. It's that fear of, oh no, they're going to put me right in the corner in the back row so nobody can hear me.
Totally.
Just after mine.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, and a lot of healing goes on. You know, we've got some people that are living on their own, marginalised, disabled, not getting out. There's one woman that we've become really good friends. She's disabled. She comes down in her lift, to stair lift. I pick her up, and I'm the only person she sees every week. That is it. Her family are up north, and she said it's a lifeline, you know, and now we're going back onto Zoom. That's going to be crucial for her mental health.
So how could people find out about your choir?
Well, I have, oh gosh, well, they're all over the place. So
how many have you got in total? You do have quite a few, don't you?
5.
Right.
2 of which, so one is Headway, one was a stroke clinic, But of course, because of lockdown, it's all gone a bit
Yeah.
screw with. And then there's 3 community choirs, which are all over the place. But my website is sophiegarner.com.
Brilliant.
And everything's on there. I've got to get a website sorted for the new book. That's the one thing I've got to sort out.
And how have you found that book process? How did you find that, sitting down and writing that? Did you enjoy it, or did you have to really push yourself to do it?
I loved it. It was so easy because I'd started, I suppose, without knowing it, Rachel, the book was writing itself from that red book that I had as a kid. And over the years, I mean, I'm a journal fiend.
Yeah, I am.
Sticker fiend. I mean, you know, these are just here because I'm a stationery queen. I literally, you know, it's a written diary all the way. Stickers.
Oh, I love that.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Look at this.
Oh, brilliant.
Sorry, only stationery people get this, as you know.
Yeah.
So I've kept notes and books for the last, I suppose, 5 years is where I've gone, I want to write a book. I want to put everything that I know is foolproof, that works with all the people I teach of all ages, into a book. So I started making notes 5 years ago. And in the last year, I've been putting it into chapters. And it was so easy to do because I know it works. I know it back to front. And I suppose the most exciting thing for me was saying to the illustrator, go to your ideas. Give me the artwork that's going to bring my writing and narrative to life. You know, and it's a journal, so it's not a book to read. It's a book with exercises, quotes, to do things. So it's the journey that the child goes through, and they fill in, and there's breathing exercises and affirmations. So I'm so proud of it, and I got the front cover for it through 3 days ago.
Exciting.
I know. So it's like it's all going to become a reality.
I've loved talking to you. I could so much more. I could have talked to you for hours this morning. My last question that I ask all the guests, because women are really bad at accepting compliments. So if you were to give yourself one compliment, what would it be?
Oh, what? To
yourself?
Sophie, you are a 5-foot fire starter, and you are going to change the world.
Yes, I love that. What a brilliant way to end. Love it. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I can't wait to see your book come out, and I know how many kids you're going to be able to reach and touch, so thank you. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much, lovely lady.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode with Sophie as much as I did talking with her. I could have talked with Sophie for hours. What a fascinating woman, and I love the fact that she's so passionate about her singing and how the impact she's having on others, particularly children, in being able to use their voice to express themselves. If it has made you want to rekindle your love for singing, perhaps you stopped after school like me and you'd like to try and give it another go. You don't have to be an expert. Like Sophie says, it's about what we can get out of it from our community sense, and our well-being will massively be improved if we really want to try something new. So why not look up and see what's going on in your community? I know, I'm sure there's lots of Zoom choirs popped up all over the place. That's something I'm going to be checking out. But if it's not for you, then get that music turned up in your shower, sing away, driving in the car, have a good sing song, because we know it makes us feel better. Enjoy the rest of your week. Stay positive. I'll see you next week.